Love is always a risk, she whispered in Italian. Elena pressed her phone tightly to her ear, her back against the dimly lit corridor wall, just beyond the bustling kitchen. Her heart fluttered as she spoke the words softly in her mother tongue, hoping the conversation would go unnoticed amid the clink of silverware and the low murmur of diners in the luxurious restaurant. She shouldn't be on the phone right now, not during her shift and definitely not tonight. But the desperation in her best friend's voice had compelled her to risk it. El, ho fatto un errore terribile. I made a terrible mistake, her friend Anna sobbed in Italian, voice cracking through the phone. He left. The wedding is off. How could I have been so stupid? Elena closed her eyes, chest tightening at the raw pain in Anna's tone. Anna was calling from Rome, thousands of miles away, utterly heartbroken. Her fiancé's sudden cold feet had sent her into despair. Elena knew she shouldn't be having this conversation at work, but Anna needed her. With a cautious glance down the hallway, Elena ensured none of the staff had followed her hurried exit from the dining floor. The faint melody of a violin drifted from the main room and mingled with the clatter of dishes from the kitchen. She pressed the phone closer to her ear. I'm here, Elena murmured in Italian, keeping her voice just above a breath. Listen to me, Anna. L'amore è sempre un rischio. Love is always a risk, but if it's real, it's worth it. You have to take that chance. Anna sniffled on the other end. I gave him everything and now I feel so empty, Elle. A quiet hiccup. How can I face this? Elena's throat tightened. She understood too well how love could leave someone shattered. Taking a steadying breath, she leaned her head against the cool plaster wall and whispered, One day at a time, Kara. I know it hurts now, but you're stronger than this pain. And when you're ready, you'll risk your heart again for someone who deserves it. A fragile silence hung between them, filled only with the crackle of the long-distance connection. Finally, Anna exhaled shakily. You always know what to say, she whispered. Grazie, Elle. I'm sorry I interrupted your work. I just didn't know who else to call. It's okay, Elena assured her gently. She glanced toward the dining area. Through the small window in the swinging door, she could see the golden glow of chandeliers and elegantly set tables. Somewhere out there was the VIP party she'd momentarily abandoned to take this call. The thought made her stomach clench with anxiety, but she forced herself to focus on Anna for a few more seconds. I'll call you as soon as my shift is over, all right? Ti voglio bene. Anch'io. I love you too, Anna whispered. Go, before you get in trouble. Elena ended the call and slipped the phone back into her apron pocket. Her fingers trembled, whether from the emotional weight of Anna's heartbreak or the dread of returning to the VIP table, she wasn't sure. She smoothed a stray lock of chestnut brown hair back into her bun and took a slow breath. The last thing she needed was to face him and his companions with her own emotions written on her face. Him. Even in her anxiety, Elena couldn't deny a ripple of anticipation at the thought of the dark-eyed man waiting at table 7. She'd noticed him immediately when she first approached the VIP party tonight at Bella Vita. He had a presence impossible to ignore, a calm, commanding stillness amid the lively chatter of his companions. In his late 30s, dressed in a charcoal suit impeccably tailored to a powerful frame, he exuded confident authority. A touch of dark stubble traced the strong lines of his jaw beneath neatly groomed black hair. But it was his eyes, dark and penetrating, that had truly unnerved her. When she poured the first taste of Barolo into his glass and his gaze flicked up to meet hers, she felt pinned in place, as if those eyes could strip her secrets down to the bone. He had thanked her softly, grazie, his voice low and unexpectedly courteous, carrying a hint of an accent she couldn't quite place. Italian, perhaps, though refined. There were 5 men at his table, the dark-eyed man and 4 others. 2 were older, distinguished-looking gents whose polite smiles didn't reach their watchful eyes. The remaining 2 were closer to his age, with the hard physiques and sharp attention of bodyguards. Their conversation had been sparse and guarded whenever she was in earshot. At one point, she'd seen a manila folder change hands and caught a murmur of Italian, territorio, accordo, before they fell silent at her approach. Whoever these VIPs were, they were no ordinary businessmen out for dinner. Elena steeled herself and pushed open the swinging door back into the dining area. She slipped quietly into the softly lit dining room, immediately spotting Marco hovering near the archway leading to the private alcove. Her manager's posture was rigid with concern, one hand nervously tugging at the end of his slicked-back salt and pepper hair. The instant Marco saw her, he hustled over, face a mix of relief and irritation. "Where did you disappear to?" he whispered harshly, grabbing her elbow to pull her out of the main view. His eyes were wide, reflecting the same tension twisting in Elena's stomach. "I'm sorry," she began in a low voice. "I had an urgent call." "I don't care if the Pope himself called," Marco hissed. "You do not vanish when we have guests like these, understand?" He glanced over his shoulder toward the alcove, then back at her, softening just a touch at whatever he saw on her face. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Elena lied, willing steadiness into her tone. She couldn't afford to let Marco think she might crack under pressure. "It won't happen again." His jaw worked, then he gave a curt nod. "Good. Jessica already brought out their mains when you were gone. They didn't complain. Now get back over there and make sure they have everything they need." Elena exhaled and nodded. "I will." As Marco stepped aside, she smoothed her apron and mustered a professional mask of calm. Inside, her nerves were aflame, but she forced a pleasant, neutral expression and walked back toward table 7. The atmosphere in the private alcove was as taut as she'd left it. The 5 men spoke in low voices, their focus on the documents spread between them. Elena approached quietly, hoping her brief absence truly went unnoticed. She reached the sideboard and lifted the bottle of Barolo, noticing that the glasses could use topping up. Starting with the nearest older gentleman, she poured smoothly, feeling his eyes on her but keeping her own politely downcast. "Our server returns," noted one of the younger men, the slim, scar-faced one, in a lightly taunting tone. Elena's pulse skipped. Had he been timing her? She offered a respectful smile and poured wine into his glass. "Pardon the delay, signore," she murmured. He just hummed, something between acknowledgement and dismissal. She moved on. At the head of the table sat the dark-eyed man. His glass was only a quarter full. As Elena stepped beside him to refill it, she felt a prickle along her neck. He was watching her again. Steady, she told herself, angling the bottle. The red wine flowed smoothly into the crystal goblet. "Your Italian is very good," he said quietly as she finished pouring. Elena almost spilled a drop in surprise. She raised her eyes to find him regarding her with that calm intensity. Heat crept up her cheeks. He must have overheard her speaking on the phone. How much had he heard? Just the bit about love being a risk? Her mind raced, but she kept her tone even. "Grazie, signore," she replied softly. "I grew up speaking it with family." Before he could inquire further, the mustached older man at the table cleared his throat. "Signorina," he said, not unkindly but firmly. "We'd like to continue our discussion in private now. Per favore." It was a polite but unequivocal dismissal. Elena dipped her head at once. "Of course, mi scusi." With practiced grace, she set the wine bottle down and withdrew from the alcove to a respectful distance. Their conversation resumed immediately, even more hushed than before. Elena stationed herself a few paces away, near enough to respond if beckoned, but far enough to give an illusion of privacy. As she straightened an unused side table, fragments of their dialogue floated to her on a lull in the dining room's noise. She caught a strained sentence or two in Italian, il traditore, traitor, before she deliberately tuned them out. Heart pounding, she realized she didn't want to know more. Whatever trouble was brewing among these men was none of her business. She just needed to survive this shift without a misstep. Minutes passed. At last there was a rustle of papers and the low clink of forks being set down. Signs the meal was winding up. Elena took that cue to reappear. She stepped back to the table with a polite smile. "Gentlemen, may I clear your plates and bring dessert or coffee?" The dark-eyed man, whom she would soon know as Luca, gave a slight nod. One by one, Elena collected the fine china plates. Most of the porcini risotto and ossobuco remained half-eaten. The tension at dinner had clearly dulled their appetites. "Coffee would be excellent, per favor," said the mustached man. He managed a tight smile toward her. "I'll have our chef prepare some tiramisu as well," Elena offered, noting the older Neapolitan man's eyes light up just a little at that. She whisked the dishes off to the kitchen and relayed the coffee and dessert order. In short order, she returned balancing a tray with 6 tiny porcelain espresso cups and a platter of tiramisu slices elegantly garnished with cocoa and berries. Elena served each man an espresso, then placed the dessert at the center of the table. As they helped themselves to the sweet, a subtle shift occurred. The charged atmosphere eased fractionally. Business, it seemed, had concluded. As they sipped their coffee and sampled dessert, the atmosphere lightened. The scar-faced younger man even cracked a wry joke to his neighbor, earning a reproachful tut from one of the elders and, much to Elena's surprise, a faint ghost of a smile from Luca. The hard line of his mouth softened for just an instant. It was gone almost as soon as it appeared, but she caught it. The sight did something strange to her heart. Still, Elena kept her focus. She quietly refilled a water glass and cleared a bread basket, attentive to their needs without intruding. Luca's voice drew her attention. "Elena, isn't it?" he asked, reading her name from the subtle gold pin on her blouse. Hearing her name in his low, accented tone made her breath hitch. "Yes, sir," she answered, meeting his gaze briefly. He tilted his head, considering her. "How long have you worked at Bella Vita?" "About 4 months," Elena replied softly. Luca nodded. "You handle pressure well." It was an observation, almost like praise. "Thank you," she murmured, not quite sure what else to say. Her face warmed, and she busied herself gathering an empty sugar packet to hide her fluster. Marco appeared then at the alcove's entrance, ready to personally see out his VIP guests. Coats were retrieved and draped over arms. The men stood, signaling the end of the evening for real. Elena stepped back, hands clasped in front of her apron. "Thank you for dining with us," she said politely. The party began filing out, one by one offering curt nods or brief handshakes to Marco. Luca was the last to move. He paused in front of Elena. For a heartbeat, those dark eyes studied her face. "Buonanotte, Elena," he said, voice low and courteous. "Have a good night." "Good night, sir," she managed, her heart inexplicably fluttering. "Buonanotte." That phantom of a smile touched his lips once more. Then he turned and followed his entourage out into the winter night. As soon as the heavy door swung closed behind them, Elena felt her knees weaken. She let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Marco patted her shoulder. "Well done," he said under his breath, his relief palpable. The worst was over, or so it seemed. Elena gave a faint smile. Together they cleared the table, collecting the generous cash tip left behind. The rest of the staff had begun their closing routines, wiping down empty tables and stacking chairs. By midnight, Bella Vita was closed. Elena changed out of her heels, shrugged on her wool coat, and stepped out into the frigid night air. The January cold bit into her cheeks as she hurried along the quiet street toward the subway station 3 blocks away. Her breath puffed white with each exhale. The city had settled into its late-hour lull. Only a few distant taxi headlights and the hum of a street lamp kept her company. Elena wrapped her coat tighter. The night's events swirled in her mind. So much tension and mystery. Men like that spell trouble, she thought, recalling how even Marco had been anxious about them. She hoped she would never cross paths with those dangerous VIPs again. She had almost reached the subway entrance when the low purr of a car engine cut through the silence behind her. Reflexively, Elena stepped closer to the building line. An expensive black sedan was creeping down the street at an unnaturally slow pace. Its headlights washed over her, and her heart lurched. Maybe it was nothing, a lost driver or a livery cab on the prowl. Still, Elena quickened her pace, boots tapping against the pavement as she closed the distance to the subway stairs. The sedan's engine revved. Suddenly, the car surged forward and swung in toward the curb ahead of her. Elena's pulse spiked in primal alarm. The car halted, idling directly between her and the subway entrance, cutting off her path. Her mouth went dry. The back door of the sedan opened, and 2 men stepped out into the dim halo of the street lamp. She recognized them instantly, the scarred younger man from Luca's table and the broad-shouldered companion who had hardly spoken a word all evening. Elena's stomach dropped. This was no coincidence. Instinct screamed at her to run, but her feet felt rooted to the concrete. The broad man, Bruno, if she recalled correctly from the others addressing him, approached slowly, palms open in a mollifying gesture. "Elena," he said calmly, almost gently, "please come with us. Our boss wants to see you." Her boss, Luca. Elena's heart thundered against her ribs. Why on earth would he want to see her, especially now in the middle of the night? A dozen wild fears flashed through her mind. Had she done something wrong? Overheard something she shouldn't have? Or was this about her phone call? Adriano, the scarred one, clicked his tongue impatiently. "Let's not make a scene," he said, eyes glinting under the streetlight. He looked as if this were merely an annoyance, fetching an errant waitress on his boss's orders. Elena's voice trembled as she found it. I don't understand. I haven't done anything." Bruno stepped closer. His size alone was intimidating, though his expression remained neutral. "We're not going to hurt you, but Mr. Vitale needs to speak with you. Now." Vitale. That must be Luca's last name, though it was the first time she'd heard it. Elena's pulse roared in her ears. The street was nearly deserted. If she screamed, maybe a lone shopkeeper or a drunk couple might hear. But there was no guarantee. And these men, they exuded calm, professional menace. They would snatch her away before any help arrived. It struck her that refusing was not an option. She could try to run, but her gut told her Bruno would catch her in a heartbeat. And the gun-shaped bulge under Adriano's coat promised worse if she fought. Elena forced her feet to move. She willed herself toward the open car door, legs shaky beneath her. "Please, there must be a mistake," she stammered as she neared Bruno. His large hand gently but firmly cupped her elbow, guiding her the last steps. "Mind your head," he said quietly, as though they were doing nothing more extraordinary than helping her into a taxi. Adriano stood aside, gesturing for her to duck into the dim interior of the Mercedes. Elena's mind screamed at her that this was crazy. She was about to be abducted by mafiosi, but she couldn't see a way out. Maybe he really just wants to ask something, she tried to reason with herself. Maybe it's not. Her hopeful thoughts evaporated as soon as she slid onto the cold leather seat, and Adriano followed in after her, closing the door with a heavy thunk. Bruno took the other side, boxing her in between them. Elena realized she was trembling. She clutched her purse on her lap as if it could shield her from the danger suffocating the air. The car pulled smoothly from the curb, and she watched with a rising sense of unreality as the subway entrance and her freedom vanished behind them. Adriano casually reached across her. "Your phone, miss." Mute, Elena allowed him to slip her phone from her apron pocket. He powered it off without even checking the screen, then slid it into his jacket. Bruno, perhaps noticing her shaking, gave a small nod as if to reassure. "It's all right," he said, not unkindly. "We just need to sort something out. Answer the boss's questions, and you'll be fine." Elena swallowed, unable to find words. Fine. They thought she'd be fine. Her life had just twisted into a nightmare, and they acted like it was a minor inconvenience. The car ride passed in tense silence. The city lights streaked by beyond the tinted windows. Elena's mind raced over every interaction with Luca and his men, searching for a clue why this was happening. The only unusual thing she'd done was her phone call. Could that really be it? Had they somehow thought she was reporting on them? Within minutes, the Mercedes glided down a ramp into an underground parking garage. Elena's heart gave a wild thump of panic as she realized this was likely Luca's private garage, his territory. Up above us, there's probably a penthouse, she thought. No one will hear me if I scream up there either. The car stopped. Adriano and Bruno stepped out first, then helped Elena up and out. Her knees nearly buckled as she stood, but Bruno's steady grip on her arm kept her upright. A private elevator waited, its polished steel doors reflecting Elena's pale, frightened face. Bruno swiped a key card, and the doors slid open. The three of them stepped inside, and Adriano pressed the topmost button, PH. Elena's stomach lurched as the elevator ascended swiftly and silently. She felt like she was rising to her fate on a platter. Bruno released her arm at last, only to reach over and gently take her purse from her shoulder. "Just in case," he said, by way of explanation. Adriano patted down the outside of her coat, likely checking for weapons or a wire. Satisfied she carried nothing of threat, they returned her purse to her, but kept a watchful stance. Her mind spun. Was Luca paranoid she'd come armed? The absurdity almost made her let out a hysterical laugh. She was a waitress who could barely swat a fly, let alone assault a mafia boss. With a soft chime, the elevator halted. The doors parted directly into a spacious foyer adorned with a marble floor and an elegant arrangement of white orchids on a console table. Warm light spilled from a grand living area beyond. Bruno guided Elena forward. Her sensible work shoes felt clumsy on the polished marble as they approached a set of tall double doors already ajar. Beyond those doors sprawled a luxurious penthouse living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panorama of the city skyline, a sea of glittering lights against the winter night. The decor was opulent yet tasteful. Cream sofas, a gleaming black grand piano in one corner, abstract art on the walls. A crystal decanter and glasses sat atop a bar cart, evidence that a drink had been poured. And there, near the windows with the city at his back, stood Luca. He had shed his suit jacket and tie. The sleeves of his white shirt were rolled to his elbows, revealing strong forearms. In his right hand he held a crystal tumbler half filled with amber liquid. He looked out at the city, seemingly lost in thought, one hand in his pocket. The tension in his posture was evident even from across the room. At the sound of their footsteps, Luca turned. His gaze found Elena immediately. In the privacy of his home, he looked no less formidable. If anything, the casual disarray, the open collar, the faint shadow of beard on his cheeks, only highlighted the raw power he carried in his frame. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Elena's heart pounded in her throat. "Boss," Adriano announced quietly. "We have her." Luca nodded, dismissing his men with a subtle motion. "Thank you." His dark eyes never left Elena. "Wait downstairs. I'll call if I need you further." Adriano gave a brisk nod, and Bruno, after a moment's hesitation and a reassuring glance at Elena, followed him back into the foyer. The heavy doors closed, and the soft click of them latching echoed loudly in Elena's ears. She was alone with Luca Vitale. The silence stretched as he regarded her. Elena's palms were damp inside her coat pockets. She couldn't look away from him, even as every instinct urged her to avert her eyes. There was no anger in his face, not exactly, more like calculation, concern, and something unreadable that made her shiver. "You must be wondering why you're here." Luca finally spoke, his tone calm. Elena managed a tiny nod. Her voice came out in a near whisper, the question tumbling from her lips. Did I do something wrong, sir?" Luca's head tilted slightly. "Sit down, Elena." He gestured to the nearest sofa. Her legs obeyed before her mind caught up. She perched on the very edge of a sumptuous cream couch, her back ramrod straight. Luca moved to an armchair adjacent to her, setting his tumbler aside on a glass coffee table. He leaned forward, forearms on his knees, those penetrating eyes searching her face. "I apologize for the abrupt method of bringing you here," he began, voice measured. "It was not my intention to frighten you." A baffled, nervous laugh escaped Elena before she could stop it. "With all due respect, you had me kidnapped off the street, Mr. Vitale." Luca's lips pressed into a line. "Fair point," he conceded. "I did. Because time is short, and I didn't trust that asking you politely would be effective, given the circumstances." Elena's brow furrowed. "What circumstances? I'm just a waitress. A nobody. Why am I here?" He studied her a moment, then said, "This is about tonight. About what occurred at Bella Vita." Her heart lurched. "It is about the phone call." Elena swallowed hard. I'm sorry if I stepped away too long or if I..." Luca lifted a hand lightly, and she fell silent. "Allow me to explain. Something happened recently in my organization. There's a leak. Someone close to me has been feeding information to my rivals." His jaw tightened subtly. "We had a meeting at the restaurant to discuss it, as you probably sensed. And during that meeting, you left our table and spoke in Italian on a phone call." Elena's stomach flipped. It sounded so terribly incriminating when he said it like that. Luca continued, voice calm but intent. "Surely you can see why that looked suspicious. I'm discussing sensitive matters, and my server suddenly slips away and whispers in Italian nearby. It raised a red flag." She shook her head vehemently. It was nothing like that, I swear. It was just a personal call, an emergency with my friend. I wasn't listening to anything you said. I had no idea what your meeting was about. He held her gaze steadily, and she realized her babbling likely sounded desperate. But it was the truth. She clasped her hands in her lap to hide their shaking and tried to compose herself. Mr. Vitale, I promise you, I have nothing to do with whatever business you were conducting. I was just trying to help a friend who was in distress. Luca's expression softened a fraction. Your friend in Italy, correct? The one you spoke to in our language. She was upset. Elena blinked. He had indeed overheard at least enough to glean that. Yes, she answered. She was having a personal crisis. A broken engagement. I know it was unprofessional of me to take the call at work, but I wasn't reporting on you or anything. I would never... She trailed off, uncertain how to plead her innocence any further. Silence fell. Luca sat back slightly, fingers drumming once on the arm of his chair. He was weighing her words. I believe you, he said at last. Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Relief rushed through her, nearly dizzying. But, Luca added, voice thoughtful, I still have a serious problem, a traitor. And oddly enough, you, an outsider, might be in a unique position to help me. She stared at him, uncomprehending. Help? You? He nodded slowly, almost to himself. Hear me out. As of tonight, I've narrowed down the suspects to a very few. It's someone in my trusted inner circle. They all know each other too well and they're on guard. But you are a neutral party. They won't suspect you're observing them if you happen to be present, say, serving drinks. Elena gaped at him. The absurdity of what he was implying took a moment to sink in. You want me to spy on someone for you? Luca's lips quirked, not quite a smile. Not quite so dramatic. I want you to work a private gathering tomorrow night, like you did at the restaurant. You would serve as needed, and quietly keep your eyes and ears open. If one of my associates is acting unusually nervous or says something out of line, you might notice when our own guards are down. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. This had to be some kind of bizarre dream, the kind where she was thrust on stage without a script. She was just a waitress and part-time business student. The world he moved in, crime, betrayals, moles, it was the exact world she had fled from back in Italy. The very last thing she ever wanted to be involved in. Elena's voice trembled with incredulity. Mr. Vitale, Luca, I can't. I wouldn't know the first thing about doing something like that. I pour wine and carry trays. I'm not some secret agent. His eyes remained on her, calm and unwavering. I know I'm asking a lot, and I wouldn't, except that I think you're uniquely positioned to help resolve this safely. You have no loyalties in our world, no agenda, and you're clearly very observant and composed under pressure. I saw that tonight. It's one evening of your life, Elena. Help me find the traitor, and I promise, you'll be well compensated and never have to deal with people like me again. Elena broke her gaze away, looking down at her clenched hands. Her mind screamed to refuse. This was madness, dangerous madness. Yet a small voice, perhaps her conscience, or perhaps sheer curiosity, asked, if someone didn't help him, what then? A mole in a crime family usually meant violence, perhaps a bloody purge. Innocent people could get caught up if it exploded, even people at the restaurant if that's where they met often. She thought of her father, Captain Giorgio De Luca, who had died trying to stop the violence of men like these. Would she be dishonoring him to collaborate with a mafia boss? Or would she, in a roundabout way, be preventing more bloodshed by helping expose a traitor before war erupted? As if reading her thoughts, Luca spoke softly. Elena, the people I suspect, they aren't kind men. If I don't root this leak out, they will cause chaos. I won't sugarcoat it. If a war breaks out because of this, innocent people could be hurt. You'd be doing a service not just for me, but for anyone who might get caught in the crossfire down the line. Her eyes snapped back to him. He sounded sincere. And the devilish part of this was, she believed him. She did have an opportunity to maybe avert something terrible. But at what risk to herself? If she was caught snooping, the mole, whoever it was, might target her. Or Luca's rivals might, thinking she was part of his crew. Elena realized she was shaking her head before she even formed the words. I'm terrified, she admitted, voice small. You say nothing will happen to me, but how can you guarantee that? What if your traitor realizes who I am? What if they try to silence me? Luca got up from his chair. He moved to sit beside her on the sofa, an unexpected closeness that made Elena's breath catch. He kept a respectful distance, but being near him sent a faint warmth radiating through her cold limbs. I give you my word, he said, looking earnestly into her eyes. No harm will come to you. I will be watching you the entire time tomorrow, and my most trusted men, Bruno and a few others, will be on security. The instant I get what I need, I'll pull you out. He hesitated, then added in a quieter tone, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I'm asking for your trust anyway, and in return, I promise to protect you, Elena. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The distant sounds of the city hummed through the glass, a reminder of the normal world continuing outside these walls. Elena studied Luca Vitale's face. Here in the soft light of his penthouse, without the veil of restaurant formality, he looked human, tired even. There was a flicker of something almost vulnerable in his eyes as he waited for her answer. Something she wouldn't have imagined a man like him ever showing. She thought of the advice she'd given Anna only an hour ago about risk and love. How ironic to be confronted with a wholly different kind of risk so soon. If she said no, she had little doubt he would still ensure she stayed silent, whether by intimidation or some other means. But he hadn't threatened her. He'd asked. And for reasons she couldn't fully fathom, she found herself believing that he truly would let no harm come to her. Okay, Elena heard herself say, her voice barely above a whisper. She straightened, swallowing her fear. I'll do it. I'll help you tomorrow. Relief washed over Luca's features. He let out a breath, and to her surprise gave a small, genuine smile. Grazie, Elena. You won't regret this. She managed a faint wry smile of her own. I hope not. Because if I do, it probably means I'm dead. A shadow passed through his eyes at her morbid joke. Luca stood, extending a hand to help her up. You have my word. That won't happen. There was a quiet intensity in the way he said it. For a fleeting second, Elena wondered if he was more concerned for her than for exposing his mole. She pushed that fanciful thought aside. As she rose, she realized with a jolt that Luca was still holding her hand. He released it the moment her balance was sure. His touch left a pleasant warmth on her skin. I'll have Bruno drive you home now, Luca said. Get some rest. Tomorrow evening we'll arrange everything. Elena nodded, feeling the exhaustion of the night catching up to her in a wave. So much had happened in such a short span. Her mind and body were aching for sleep. Luca escorted her to the elevator, a protective hand lightly at her back. Elena, he said as the doors slid open, his tone almost gentle. I know you're scared, but I promise, after this is done, you can return to your life. I'll make sure of it. Perhaps I can even help make that life a little easier. A better job, financial support. That's not necessary, she cut in quickly, stepping into the elevator. She didn't want to feel bought. Let's just get through tomorrow. He inclined his head, not arguing. As you wish. Until tomorrow, then. As the doors began to close, Elena caught one last glimpse of Luca's face. He looked concerned, as if he truly regretted uprooting her night. She offered a tentative smile of reassurance just before the elevator sealed her in. Her heart didn't stop its wild hammering until she was back in the Mercedes with Bruno at the wheel. Adriano conspicuously absent, perhaps left behind to guard Luca. The drive to her apartment was a blur. Bruno, true to Luca's word, delivered her right to her doorstep without so much as a harsh word. He even apologized again for frightening her. Elena floated through the remainder of the night in a haze. She called Anna to let her know she was all right, omitting, of course, the insane development that had followed their call, then collapsed into bed as dawn was breaking, mind racing despite her exhaustion. Tomorrow she would walk back into the lion's den, this time knowingly. And alongside the fear that accompanied that thought, something else fluttered in her chest. A strange trust in Luca Vitale. However foolish it might be, she felt that he meant what he said about keeping her safe. Love is always a risk, she had told Anna, but every kind of trust was a risk too. Tomorrow, Elena would find out if her trust in a mafia boss was terribly misplaced, or if it would save more lives than just her own. The next evening, true to his word, Luca arranged everything. Just after 8 p.m., a car arrived at Elena's apartment to pick her up, a different driver this time, who politely handed her an elegant black dress and a small kit of cosmetics on behalf of Mr. Vitale. Clearly, Luca wanted her to blend in at a private gathering that would not be held at a restaurant. Elena changed hurriedly, trying not to think too hard about the fact that her life had become something out of a thriller novel. The dress was tasteful and just her size, a knee-length sheath that allowed ease of movement. She kept her hair swept into a neat twist and applied minimal makeup with unsteady hands. The driver delivered her not to Bella Vita, but to a high-rise apartment building with security so tight that armed guards patrolled the lobby. It wasn't Luca's own residence, she realized, but likely a neutral location he used for business gatherings, perhaps to put his suspects at ease. Bruno greeted her in the lobby and escorted her up to the 20th floor, where soft music and low conversation could already be heard through a partially open door. "You okay?" he asked quietly as they paused outside. Elena's stomach was doing flips, but she managed a nod. "Just a little nervous." Bruno offered a faint smile. "Don't worry, I've got your back." It was oddly comforting. He opened the door and guided her in. The space was a luxurious suite with a sweeping view of downtown. Inside, a small gathering of men had formed. Elena immediately recognized Luca, standing by a marble-top bar with a whiskey in hand, and Adriano leaning casually against a wall. On a sofa sat the mustached Signor Bianchi, already nursing an espresso. And by the window, gazing out with an affable air, was the older Neapolitan gentleman from dinner, Carlo. Luca's eyes found Elena the moment she entered. The slightest crease of tension in his brow smoothed out when he saw her. He stepped forward to greet her as if she were an expected colleague, rather than an enlisted civilian in this dangerous charade. "Elena," he said warmly. He gave a small, reassuring nod, then turned to the group. "Gentlemen, I hope you don't mind. I've asked Miss Greco to help serve us tonight." Bella Vita spoke highly of her skills. Bianchi merely shrugged, but Carlo offered a polite smile. "Not at all. A pleasure to see you again, Signorina," the older man said kindly. "Likewise, sir," Elena replied softly. Within minutes, she fell into the familiar rhythm of serving, which helped calm her nerves. There was a trolley with coffee and drinks on standby. She moved about pouring whiskey for Luca and Bianchi, and chamomile tea for Carlo, who requested it. If one didn't know better, the gathering could have been mistaken for a casual social visit among old friends, but Elena could sense the tension roiling beneath the surface. Luca's hospitality was gracious yet reserved. Bianchi's eyes kept darting to Luca as if trying to gauge his mood, and Carlo's affability had a brittle edge, like he was trying to keep everyone at ease. After some small talk about inconsequential topics, a new restaurant opening in the city, the unusually cold winter, Luca set down his drink. His face grew more serious. It was time to address the real reason they were here. Luca's tone turned grave. "There's been talk of a leak in our operations," he said quietly. A heavy silence fell. Signor Bianchi set his glass down with a clink, tension evident in the tight set of his shoulders. "Do you suspect one of us?" he asked bluntly, looking from Luca to Carlo. Luca met his gaze evenly. "I hope not, but we have to consider every possibility." Carlo shifted, an uneasy expression on his face, but said nothing. Bianchi's jaw flexed. "After all these years, it sounds like an accusation." His voice held a mix of resentment and hurt. No one else spoke. The air itself seemed to be holding its breath. Bianchi abruptly stood, bristling with indignation. "Perhaps we should all take a moment," he muttered, tugging down the front of his suit jacket. "Scusi." With that, he strode toward a hallway off the living area, ostensibly to cool off or use the restroom. Elena's heart thumped. She watched over the rim of the coffee tray as Bianchi disappeared down the corridor. Her eyes flicked to Luca. He gave the barest nod. Setting the tray down, Elena murmured, "Excuse me a moment," to no one in particular, and slipped away quietly, following the direction Bianchi had gone. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she crept down the softly lit hallway. She found Bianchi at the slightly ajar door of what looked like a study or small office. He was on his cell phone, speaking in Italian so low she had to inch closer to catch it. "He suspects," Bianchi was saying, a hiss of urgency in his tone. No. Keep the buyers on standby. I'll handle it tonight. Yes, stasera. I'll clean up everything. By morning it'll be done." Elena's blood ran cold. Clean up everything by morning. That sounded horribly like Bianchi was planning to eliminate someone, maybe Luca himself, before anyone could expose him. A floorboard creaked under her foot. Elena's breath caught. Bianchi spun, shoving the phone into his pocket. His eyes went wide, then hardened when he saw Elena lingering in the hall. "What the hell are you doing back here?" he snapped. I'm sorry, sir," Elena stammered, trying to appear innocently startled. "I was just looking for the washroom." Bianchi's lips curled in a sneer. "It's occupied. Get back to the sitting room." Her heart hammered as she dipped her head and hurried back toward the living area. She had to alert Luca. Now. Before she made it 3 steps, a hand like a vice clamped around her upper arm from behind. Elena gasped as Bianchi yanked her to a halt and spun her to face him. His eyes blazed with sudden, terrifying suspicion. "How long were you standing there?" he growled. "Not long." Elena quivered, eyes wide. "I didn't hear anything, I swear. I just—" "Liar," he spat. With an impressively swift motion for a man of his age, Bianchi drew a pistol from inside his coat and pressed it under Elena's chin. She froze, terror flashing white-hot through her veins. "Please," she squeaked. "Shut up," he snarled in her ear, yanking her close as a human shield. Keeping the gun tucked discreetly against her, he began hauling her back toward the living room. Elena's mind screamed in panic. One thought cut through. He's going to kill Luca. Perhaps Bianchi assumed Luca suspected him, correctly, and now he was going to make a desperate move. As they emerged from the hallway, Carlo and Luca both looked up in surprise. Their expressions shifted to alarm when they registered Bianchi's grip on Elena and the wild gleam in his eyes. Luca's face went ashen. "Bianchi," he said sharply, stepping forward without thinking. "Let her go." Bianchi dragged Elena backward a few steps, raising the gun now openly to her temple. Elena whimpered as cold metal bit her skin. "I'm done taking orders," Bianchi growled. The veneer of polite civility had dropped, revealing the desperate, cornered man beneath. "You couldn't leave well enough alone, Luca." "Had to dig and dig. And now here we are." Carlo rose slowly, hands slightly raised. "Matteo, calmati," he began placatingly, using Bianchi's first name. "Shut your mouth, Carlo," Bianchi barked. "You've always been Luca's lapdog." Luca's eyes were on Elena, his expression a mix of fury and fear, for her. "Bianchi," he said in a dangerously low voice. "This is between us. She's just a bystander. Let her go and we'll talk." Bianchi let out a harsh bark of laughter. "No, I think this sweet little eavesdropper has sealed the deal. You had to involve outsiders, eh? Did you really think I wouldn't notice your clever setup?" He pressed the gun harder against Elena's head, making her cry out softly. "Put your guns down," he snapped past her, addressing Bruno and Adriano, who had now burst into the room from their post by the elevator, weapons drawn. Elena's eyes darted to Luca's men. Bruno's face was grim, Adriano's taut with anger, but neither dared make a move with Elena in the line of fire. At a subtle hand motion from Luca, they reluctantly lowered their pistols. "Good," Bianchi snarled. "Now, here's what's going to happen. I'm walking out of here with her. You're going to let me, or I blow her brains out all over your nice carpet. Once I'm clear, I'll let her go." He was inching toward the door, dragging Elena with him. Her mind raced, desperate for any escape. If he got her out of this room, she knew he wouldn't let her live. He was just using her to slip away. Elena met Luca's eyes. There was a stark terror in them she hadn't seen before. Terror for her. Something about that unlocked a well of courage inside her. As Bianchi edged them closer to the foyer, Elena mustered her strength. With a sudden burst of movement, she drove her elbow back, smashing it into Bianchi's ribs with all her might. At the same time, she stomped down on his instep. He shouted in pain, his grip loosening for one crucial second. Elena tore herself free and dove to the side. A thunderous gunshot exploded in the enclosed space. Elena hit the floor, ears ringing. She scrambled behind the sofa, hands over her head. For a dizzying moment she was afraid she'd been shot, but as she frantically patted herself there was no pain, no blood. She peeked around the couch. Bianchi still stood, but Bruno had slammed him against the wall, wrestling for control of the gun. Another shot rang out, shattering a mirror on the wall. Carlo cried out and ducked behind an armchair. Luca darted forward like lightning. He seized Bianchi's wrist, wrenching it back cruelly until the pistol clattered from numb fingers. Adriano lunged and scooped up the weapon, immediately aiming it at Bianchi's chest as Bruno pinned the traitor's arms behind his back. "Basta," Luca snapped, breathing hard. "It's over." Bianchi struggled futilely in Bruno's iron grip. His lip was bleeding. Bruno must have struck his face against the wall. Yet despite the blood and sweat, Bianchi let out a crazed, bitter laugh. It'll never be over, Vitale. You think cutting off one head ends the Hydra? Luca's face contorted with a mix of rage and something like grief. He stepped closer to Bianchi, fists clenched. For a terrifying beat, Elena thought Luca might kill him with his bare hands. But then Luca exhaled slowly, reining himself in. Take him, he ordered quietly. Bruno nodded and muscled Bianchi, cursing and spitting, out of the living room toward the foyer. Adriano followed, gun never wavering from Bianchi's back. Within seconds, they disappeared into the elevator, presumably to deliver him to whatever fate awaited traitors in Luca Vitale's world. Silence settled, broken only by the ragged sound of Elena's breathing. She realized she was still crouched on the floor. Trembling from head to foot, she tried to push herself up, but her legs felt like jelly. Elena! Luca was suddenly there, vaulting over the shattered glass and debris to reach her side. He knelt and gently took her by the shoulders. Dio mio, are you hurt? Elena opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She managed to shake her head. The shock was crashing down on her now that the adrenaline was ebbing. Tears she'd been holding back overflowed without warning. A strangled sob tore from her throat. I'm okay, she gasped, though her body was quaking violently. I'm not hurt. Luca's eyes glistened with profound relief. Thank God, he breathed. Then, without hesitation, he wrapped her in his arms. Elena melted into the embrace, her shock and fear pouring out in tears against Luca's chest. His warmth enveloped her, one hand cradling the back of her head as if to shield her from the horrors of the last few minutes. It's all right, he murmured against her hair, his voice rough. You're safe now. I've got you. Elena clung to his shirt, sobbing into the soft fabric while the scent of his cologne and the faint musk of sweat anchored her to the reality that she was alive, and that he was alive too. It hit her in a rush. If she hadn't acted, Luca might be dead on the floor right now. The thought made her tremble harder. He held her tighter, rocking ever so slightly as he whispered soothing words in Italian she couldn't quite parse through her crying. She felt his lips brush the crown of her head in a tender, comforting gesture. Eventually, her sobs subsided into sniffles. Embarrassment crept in as Elena realized she was practically in Luca Vitale's lap on the floor, gripping him like a lifeline. She started to pull back, but Luca cupped her cheeks, forcing her to look at him. Elena, he said softly, eyes searching hers. You saved my life. You know that, don't you? She hiccuped a shaky breath. We saved each other, I think. A faint, shaky laugh escaped him. Perhaps. His thumbs gently wiped tears from beneath her eyes. I'm so sorry I put you in danger. This is exactly what I never wanted to happen. If you hadn't... I made my choice, Elena interrupted, finding a flicker of strength in her voice. You asked for my help, and I chose to give it. I knew the risks. Her chin wobbled. Though I admit, I didn't expect quite that. Luca closed his eyes briefly, as if in pain. I'm sorry, he repeated, forehead nearly touching hers as he leaned in, still cradling her face. When I think of what could have happened to you... But it didn't, she whispered. She realized her hands had settled against his chest, where she could feel his heart pounding as wildly as her own. I'm all right, and you're all right. We stopped him. He opened his eyes, and the raw emotion in them stole her breath. Gratitude? Yes, but also concern and something deeper, warmer. Elena, you're the bravest person I've ever met, he said quietly. You had no reason to risk yourself for me, yet you did. Why? She flushed, suddenly aware of their closeness. His lips were inches from hers, his breath fanning softly across her skin. Why had she? Hours ago, she would have insisted she wouldn't risk anything for a man like him. Yet here she was. Because I believed in you, she confessed, her voice trembling with honesty. Some part of me trusted that you were a man of your word, that you truly didn't want anyone innocent hurt. And because I couldn't stand the thought of you being killed when I might stop it. Her cheeks burned, but she held his gaze. I care about what happens to you, Luca. His eyes widened slightly, something like wonder dawning there. Elena felt his grip on her tighten almost imperceptibly. In the silence that followed, the distant wail of sirens began to rise. Someone in the building likely reported the gunshots, but neither of them moved. Luca swallowed hard. I don't deserve that, he whispered. Your trust, your care. Maybe not, Elena replied softly, a tiny smile touching her lips. But you have them anyway. A quiet, almost incredulous laugh puffed from him. He brushed a strand of hair tenderly behind her ear. You are extraordinary, Elena Greco. His voice turned husky. Grazie, for everything. Her heart skittered. The intensity of his stare, the warmth of his hands, the scent of him surrounding her. It was overwhelming in the most intoxicating way. She realized with clarity that somewhere between last night and this perilous moment, she had crossed a line. This man, who by all rights should have terrified her, had come to mean something to her, more than something. Perhaps he saw the shift in her expression, or perhaps he simply felt the same gravitational pull, because Luca slowly leaned in. Elena's breath caught as his lips hovered at the edge of hers, giving her a final chance to refuse. She didn't. Their mouths met in a gentle, searching kiss. Elena sighed against his lips, her eyes fluttering shut. The world around them faded. The sirens, the lingering smell of gunpowder, the shattered glass. There was only Luca's warm breath and the softness of his mouth moving with hers, tentative at first, and then, as she answered in kind, growing bolder. He tasted of whiskey and a hint of sweetness from dessert, and something distinctly him that made her head spin. Elena pressed closer, her fingers curling into his shirt for anchorage. Luca responded with a quiet groan, one hand sliding into her hair to hold her steady as he deepened the kiss. Time itself seemed to stop for those few precious seconds. When they finally parted, Elena's cheeks were flushed and Luca's breathing was uneven. He rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed as if savoring the closeness. I've wanted to do that since last night, he confessed softly, a touch of sheepishness in his grin. Probably inappropriate to admit. Elena's lips curved. I won't tell if you won't. He chuckled, then helped her to her feet as the distant sirens drew nearer. Carlo peered out from behind the armchair, looking both relieved and decidedly bewildered by the sight of his mafia boss and the waitress holding on to each other like lovers. Luca cast him a look. Carlo, basta, it's over. You can breathe now. Carlo raised his hands in surrender and managed a shaky smile. I'll just give a statement to security, he mumbled, politely making himself scarce toward the door. Bruno and Adriano returned a minute later, both winded but confirming that Bianchi was handed over to some very unsympathetic colleagues of theirs in the garage. They tactfully pretended not to notice that Luca still kept a protective arm around Elena's waist, or that her hand remained entwined with his. When at last Luca and Elena were alone again, aside from the discreet cleanup team already starting to handle the shattered mirror and bullet casings, Luca guided her to the window. Dawn was beginning to creep into the sky, painting it a muted indigo. They stood side by side, Elena tucked against Luca's side, her head on his shoulder, as exhaustion and contentment warred within her. "You must be tired," he murmured, brushing his thumb lightly over her hand. "I should be," she answered, surprising herself with a light laugh. "But I'm a little too wired to sleep." He tilted his head to rest gently against hers. "I know the feeling." They fell silent, watching the first hint of sun glow on the horizon. In a few hours, this nightmare would just be news headlines. Local businessman survives attempt on life, or some sanitized version thereof. She'd likely be questioned by someone, perhaps, though Luca would surely control the narrative. Elena realized she didn't care about any of that right now. All she cared about was that they were both alive, and that Luca was holding her like he never wanted to let go. As if sensing her thoughts, Luca squeezed her closer. "Elena, I won't blame you if you never want to see me again after this." She glanced up sharply. His expression was calm, but his eyes betrayed a touch of dread. The mighty Luca Vitale was afraid of her rejection. She turned in his arms so she could face him fully. Tentatively, she reached up to smooth a lock of his dark hair that had fallen across his brow. "You're kidding, right?" she said softly. "After all this, you think I'd just walk away?" He searched her gaze. "I dragged you into a world you wanted nothing to do with. Your instinct was right. My life is dangerous. I won't insult you by pretending it's not. I am a dangerous man, Elena, but you have a heart," she finished for him, giving him a small, affectionate smile. "I saw it, and I think it's a good one, buried under all that risk and power." Emotion flickered in his face, a mix of hope and relief that made him look almost boyish for a split second. "If you stay with me," he said slowly, "I can't promise a normal life. I can only promise that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe and to justify the faith you've shown in me." Elena stood on tiptoe and pressed a gentle kiss to his lips, silencing any further doubt. He sighed against her mouth, wrapping her fully in his embrace. When they parted, she rested a hand over his heart, feeling its steady, reassuring beat. "We'll figure it out," she whispered. "Love is always a risk, but I'm starting to think it's one worth taking." Luca smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit up his dark eyes. He pressed his forehead to hers and murmured, "With you, Kara, I'll take that risk every time." Outside, the rising sun broke through a bank of clouds, casting golden light over the awakening city. In Luca's arms, Elena felt a matching warmth spread within her chest, a bright, hopeful beginning after so much darkness. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. She had found something precious amidst all this danger, someone who saw her courage and cherished it, someone she dared to trust with her heart. Elena closed her eyes, leaning into Luca's solid strength. In that quiet moment, with sirens fading and dawn breaking, she knew one thing for certain. Some risks in life were truly worth taking. And loving Luca Vitale against all odds felt like the greatest reward fate had ever granted her. Love was always a